Hi everyone, welcome back. In this video, I'm going to take you along with me as I make for my family a very delicious split pea soup. Now, I will caution you, I don't really follow recipes. I kind of adjust things to my own liking, and that is the beauty of cooking. If you have ever wanted to cook, but you were a little intimidated by it, just know that cooking is an art. Baking is a science, but don't let that scare you either, because once you get used to baking, you can also adjust things to your own liking. You will notice I am looking at that bowl of onions and the other bowls of frozen vegetables, realizing that I'm not going to be able to get that out and use that in my soup as I wanted to, because that would take too long to thaw, or I would have to spend time running it under hot water at my sink. So I ended up just preparing the vegetables on my own. What had happened was that I had prepared the vegetables and I ran out of Ziploc bags. And so I ended up sticking some vegetables into Pyrex dishes, as you can see, and I stuck them in the freezer. And that's fine if you remember ahead of time to pull them out and thaw them out. But I didn't. And so at 2 o'clock, I was not going to start running them under hot water and defrosting them. I just feel like that's a waste of water and energy and efforts, meaning my own energy and efforts. I don't have time for that. So I ended up just chopping up some vegetables really quickly. I didn't mention this before, but this is a fantastic soup for breastfeeding moms. Oh yes, you do see me using the back of the knife. If you want to protect your knives, always make sure that when you scrape the food off the cutting board, you are using the back of the knife, not the blade. Now, I will tell you, I still feel like I'm always having to sharpen my knives, but I do spend a lot of time in the kitchen. Thank God we are a family of 8. And so I'm in the kitchen a lot. So my knives have to get sharpened very regularly. At least that knife. I like to use this knife a lot, so I'm always having to sharpen it. But just make sure that when you are scraping things off a cutting board, use the back side of the knife. And yeah, that onion was really, really sharp. I do wear contact lenses, which is supposed to help to prevent you from crying. But that didn't prevent me because I'm walking off to get a tissue. But yeah. Go ahead, use the back side of the knife to protect the knives, and cut your onions and your vegetables as you wish to. Whatever size is totally fine. I am going to puree this soup, and so that's why it doesn't really make a difference the size that I cut the vegetables. You're going to see me mixing this soup a lot. Some of the parts of the mixing I did cut out. But I wanted you to see how many times I went to mix that soup, because I want you to understand, like, in order to get a good saute, you want to mix it a lot. Yes, I am putting the celery into a dish for later because I cut it up and then I realized I didn't want to put it in right away. Why? Why don't I put the celery in right away? Great question. I like to cook the root vegetables first. Root vegetables do take a little bit longer to cook than vegetables that grow above the ground, like celery and squash and things like that. And because of that, I don't want the vegetables to turn like stocky if they get overcooked. No big deal, but like, it's not going to ruin the food. It changes the flavor a little bit. Yep, I decided there to add another carrot, and I really wish I had grabbed another carrot, because you're going to see towards the end of the video, I'm actually going to throw in a carrot baby food. So I wish I had thrown another carrot in there. I'm going to put the original recipe in the description box. The original recipe is the recipe I based the soup off of. But I don't really follow recipes. And also, I like to put a lot more split peas in my, like, in general, when I'm cooking something, like my mushroom barley soup also, hopefully I'll show that to you guys soon, in another video. But like, when I'm making a split pea soup, I want split peas. Like, I think the recipe calls for like a half a cup of split peas. I'm like, that's not a split pea soup. That's like, let's throw some vegetables and some split peas into a pot together. So yes, I do use a lot of vegetables, but I also use a ton of split peas. And I'm just going to point out that the reason I do use so many vegetables, I actually think the amount of carrots I use is actually per the recipe. Maybe I put in an extra a little bit, but I am going to throw in some squash and other vegetables you'll see in a moment. And the reason for that is because I believe that the soup calls for vegetable stock. And I'm still rebuilding my freezer stash of like stuff. I need to like build up what I have in my freezer. And I don't have, at least at the time of this recording, I still don't have vegetable stock in my freezer. So I'm going to put in some extra vegetables. That way it just gives a nice good flavor. And I mean, that's what vegetable stock is anyways. It's just a bunch of vegetables in a pot. You add water to it. And well, according to real vegetable stock, you're supposed to strain the vegetable stock. I don't do that. I just puree it because I'm like, let's get all the nutrients in, the fiber, the everything, right? So for here, you're going to see I'm going to throw some extra vegetables in soon. But yeah, these are normally, if you want to make this soup really quickly, not normally, these soups take a long time to make. Like, it's a yummy, delicious, amazing soup. But I'm going to tell you right off the bat, the way I make soup is time consuming. And so I really highly recommend if you can cut up your vegetables at a time that's convenient for you and then just stick them in the freezer. Or if you want to go ahead and buy them already pre-chopped up, frozen or fresh. Honestly, I recommend if you're really, really super busy, no pun intended, but like if you're really busy, I recommend buying it frozen so that way you don't have to worry about like using it up before it goes bad in the fridge. And that's kind of why I stuck those vegetables into those Pyrex dishes, because I wanted to make sure that they didn't go bad sitting in the fridge and that they ended up in the freezer. Yes, I do mix that soup a lot. Back at the beginning of my marriage, I got a cookbook and it said to saute the vegetables in order to make the soup. And then I think all the recipes in that cookbook said that you should saute the vegetables first. And I've always gotten compliments on my soup, and I've always done this, like not just with those soups, but I loved those soups when I made them when I got married. They were so delicious. And so then anytime I made a soup, I always just sauteed the vegetables first, even if the recipe didn't tell you to do so. What I'm peeling right now is a turnip. If you're not familiar with it, it's kind of not sharp. It's kind of spicy, like a radish. Obviously not spicy, not like hot pepper spicy. We're talking like nice, yummy, sharp flavor, but not like burning spicy, like a hot pepper. I'm putting aside some of it for later for my freezer. Because like I said, this is something that I would stick in a vegetable stock, not in like a regular everyday soup, although I do put that in my chicken soup when I have time. But yeah, so this is something I would put in my vegetable stock. So I'm only putting in like either half or a third, or I don't know how much of it I'm putting in. I can't remember. You saw me cut it up. So I'm just putting in as much as I want. Again, your kitchen, you do you, I do me. You have to do things to flavor. I am adding water and I'm mixing again because I want to make sure that the vegetables are not going to stick to the bottom of my pan, my pot, sorry. You want to make sure that as you're sauteing, because if you see, the temperature is quite high on that because I want it to cook quickly, but I also don't want to burn the vegetables. So you want to make sure that if you do have your pot on a high temperature, that you are mixing frequently and you are adding water. That's garlic that I'm peeling, by the way, in case you can't see it. But yeah, I'm just peeling a bunch of garlic and throwing that in. I don't actually know how many cloves I put in there. But I'll put the recipe in the comments below. I think I tripled the recipe. And so you'll see my add-ins and everything. But it's such a versatile recipe. That's why I'm sharing it with you, because you can literally do anything you want with it. You can put anything you want, any vegetables you want can go in, and it's so, so delicious. But yeah, go ahead, make sure that if you have your soup on a high temperature, like mine is on high right now, you see all that steam coming up, make sure you are A, mixing frequently, and B, you don't leave your soup or stove unattended, obviously for safety purposes, but you don't want to burn your food, okay? It is such a shame if you put all that food in the pot and you walk away and forget about it. So how many split peas did I actually use? I would say there's probably about 3 or 4 cups of dry split peas in those containers. What makes the most sense is I probably would have put 1.5 cups into each of those containers, which would mean that there would be 4.5 cups, right? 1.5 plus 1.5 is 3, plus another 1.5 is 4.5. It would make sense, that there would be 4.5 cups of split peas in that altogether, because I think that when I do put the split peas into the containers to soak, so what I did was, oh, by the way, what I just put in was like a little container full of summer squash, the yellow squash, and now I'm doing the zucchini. So what I do is I soak the split peas in advance, like soak it for 8 to 12 hours, drain it, rinse it, then soak it again for like another day. Obviously make sure you're checking on it and rinsing it like after like 8 hours or so, depending on the temperature in your house. But you don't want to just let it go for a day without checking it. When I say a day, I mean like 8 to 12 hours. Yep. Now I'm putting in the celery, which means I'm towards the end of this cooking of meaning of putting in all the vegetables. But yeah, so that's probably about 4.5 cups of dry split peas. So I soaked it, rinsed it, all that for probably 1 to 2 days. And then once it was all soaked, that's the organic no salt seasoning from Costco. I love it, but I also don't like black pepper. Like I'm not a pepper person. So I only put a little bit in. That is a 1/8 cup measuring cup, which is the equivalent of 2 tablespoons. I think that's as much as I put in, and the soup came out so good, but obviously salt your food to taste as you like it. So yeah, after I rinsed the split peas, after they soaked and rinsed and all that stuff for 1 or 2 days, however long I did it for, I then went ahead and cooked it in the Instant Pot. Why did I do that? Because I wanted to make sure to cook it and not leave it in my fridge to go bad. So what has happened in the past is I'll prep the beans or whatever it is, the greens. Let's say I want to make a mushroom barley soup. So I'll prep the barley like ahead of time. And oh, by the way, that turnip is just gonna go in my freezer. I think I mentioned that already. That's gonna go into another soup or something else. But yeah, so in the past I have put the stuff in my fridge, meaning to use it later. And then, something came up. Life happens, okay? I'm sure it happens with you too, that something comes up and you get busy with something else and you never get around to making the food that you wanted to make, right? So in order to prevent that, because I have thrown food into my compost because it was questionable and iffy, and I didn't want to use it. My friend came in one day, she saw I had a green sitting in on my counter in a container. She's like, "Oh, you fermented that?" I was like, "Maybe." She's like, "Oh, it's probably still good." I was like, "Maybe." I threw it into my compost. So yeah, because that's happened in the past, I go ahead and when I want to make something, I'll soak it and I'll rinse it and drain it and everything. And when I'm finally ready to it's at that stage where I'm going to use it, I'll just cook it in the Instant Pot and then freeze it. Obviously label it if you're going to do that. Now I'm checking the carrots in the pot to make sure that they're soft. I'm putting my spatula through a carrot, and that's my gauge to see that the vegetables are fully cooked. The reason for doing that is once I put the split peas in, the soup is going to become the split peas are going to sink to the bottom. And if your vegetables are not fully cooked, you run the risk of burning the split peas because they're just very heavy. And so if you don't want to burn your soup, then make sure that the vegetables are fully cooked beforehand, because if you need to continue cooking the vegetables, you need to keep the temperature higher. So the reason I did just raise the temperature was because I do want to defrost these. That was why I moved the containers closer to the pot. So as when I added the liquid, so it simmered for a little bit, so the containers were sitting next to the hot pot. That's why I didn't have to run the containers underwater. They were able to just defrost enough so I can pop them out. I don't know if you noticed, but when I popped out the first container, I did it directly onto my spatula so I didn't cause a big splash, because obviously the soup is hot. I didn't want to burn myself. So make sure that if you're going to do this, then make sure you are emptying the soup, the frozen split peas onto, oops, don't do that. Make sure you're emptying the frozen split peas onto the spatula to lower it down gently. The second container I emptied onto the first brick of split peas, so there was no splash. The recipe calls for a sweet potato, which I didn't have, and so I ended up using sweet potato baby food. Obviously, the most cost-effective way of doing this is to use fresh sweet potatoes, but I wasn't running out to the store at that point, and so I'm using the sweet potato baby food. You can see 3 jars, but I'm going to go ahead and grab another 3. I'm emptying out I'm getting all the sweet potato because I really want that sweet potato flavor. So I'm just putting water into the jar, shaking it up, and emptying it into the pot. Make sure that when you do this, you do it directly. Oh, there's my baby shaking my tripod. Make sure you do it directly over the pot, transferring the water from one jar to the next. Otherwise, you might spill on the counter and have a mess to clean up, as you will see me do in a moment. I'm going to go get the other 3 jars of baby food after I stir this for a second. But what you won't see in the video is me adding the other container of split peas. I do end up adding that 3rd container of split peas because I felt like the soup needed that 3rd container. Yeah, that's another 3 jars of sweet potato baby food. And yep, I'm just gonna do the same exact thing. And yep, there I am. I spilled it on the counter. So yeah, I'm just shaking it up, just adding that in, adding in the water that's spilled. I still have a little mess on the counter to clean up, but that's fine. That's life, you know. There's always what to clean up, right? But yeah, make sure you are constantly stirring your soups if you have it at a high temperature. I cannot stress it enough, because if you don't constantly stir your soups and you have them, yep, there's the carrot baby food. If you don't constantly stir your soups and you have them at a high temperature, they will burn, and it's just going to be such a waste of your time and efforts. And like, you know, as mothers, our time is already like, you know, I don't want to say limited because we have the same amount of time as everybody else, but we have, I feel like, a lot more on our plates than other people. So yes, you do see I am lowering that, and now I'm back hours later. I have fed my family dinner, and I had one kid who, I don't know why I hadn't given him dinner at that point, but I am just kind of cleaning up, but also serving dinner at the same time. Obviously, there's a huge mess on the counter. That is life. That is definitely life in my house. I made, to go with that, I made the quinoa pasta from, I mean, I don't know if Costco still has it anymore. I didn't see it the last few times actually, but I've had this quinoa pasta for a while. We don't do a lot of pasta in our family. But the pasta is really good. We just don't do a lot of like tomato sauce and stuff. So that's the final product. I pureed it with the immersion blender, and that was how I served it. Obviously, you're going to see me go ahead and put it away really quickly. Just make sure that when you do put your food away in the freezer, like whatever it is, soup, other kinds of food, make sure that you try and squeeze out as much air as possible. That's why when you freeze, let's say, pans of food, okay, you know, we can talk about that in a different video. We'll talk about panned food other times. But make sure that if you freeze soup, you're going to see, I'm going to try and squeeze out as much air as I can. And I'm also going to try and fill up as much as I can. So that container right there, I don't think it has as much soup as I want it. Oh, yep, there I go for the ladle. And I'm adding more soup to that pot, because if you make sure that there isn't like so much air in the container, then the soup will literally taste fresh. Like when you pull it out to give it out, like to feed it to yourself, your family, whoever, it will taste so good as if you just made it. So make sure that you try to squeeze it, and don't make yourself crazy over it. Okay. You can see I'm going to take off that lid, take out some soup, because I also don't want this container to burst open. And then of course it can get freezer burnt that way. But again, don't make yourself crazy over it. Just get in the kitchen, start cooking, start making healthy meals for yourself. It's going to really help you if you're breastfeeding. Make sure to label everything. And if there's any special ingredients that you used, mark that. So that way, if you want to like be aware of sensitivities or anything, make sure to date everything. That way, you know when you need to use it by. That's all I have for you for today. I hope you enjoy the soup recipe. Let me know if you have any questions down below, and share with us in the comments, what are your favorite soup making tips and what are your favorite soups to make? Thank you so much for hanging out with me, and I hope to see you next time. Have a great day.